So I was thinking more about this idea of the source texts. So one of the whole things about, like, say, the red pill is that there's these people who are the kind of these quote unquote influencers, and they've taken the red pill, bro, and so many of them, they don't really represent somebody who, like, say, Sneeko's version of the red pill. He's not citing things he's read. Like, I gotta admit, I now and then Andrew Tate will cite some work, and I'm like, I don't really watch his content that much, but there will be something that I'm like, that's actually a pretty good citation there. Even Jordan Peterson actually did a clever citation of Lao Tzu recently in front of Congress when he was describing what the deal was with China and TikTok. And then the government observation of people via the internet, and the kind of that kind of security state that it appears that more and more of the world is, or the world is just simply becoming more and more of a security state. So this, of course, is something that was written about by Aldous Huxley, and that Aldous Huxley was a part of it's that even though he writes this as a piece of fiction, many people cite him as sort of a milieu of people at the time that really kind of thought, like, this was it was sort of the natural progression of things, that eventually would become a digitally monitored security state. Yeah. And that it was a kind of an inevitability. There you find that this translates into the next generation beyond that, into climate change, with first global freezing of the 1970s, and then on to global warming of the ozone layer was the 80s. I was there, and 90s with Gore, and Gore actually making an industry out of it. With the carbon cap and trade thing, and that he's become I think a billionaire off of global carbon cap and trade market. To say, the Clintons, they went the route of being a big part of Google and that foundational alphabet stuff, so that's how they made their money. Gore got into the climate change business, so they could all get rich. Off of something that they created via legislation. Now, the thing about this that I was thinking about is not knowing who are the right quoting. Like, if you don't know who Alexander Dugin is, that it's very difficult to criticize Vladimir Putin and the Eurasianists and the Russians, because you have to actually know some idea what Russians are thinking and what their motivations are. In any game setting, there is usually so many objectives that either team are looking to do. If it could be any objective, well, that's not a game. It has to be a finite number of objectives. So you always want to know what your opponent wants. This was the key thing about the Trump administration and how they negotiated. Everybody said this too, at the time and later. They all admitted he would focus on, well, what do you want? Because this is what we want, and that this was and that it was a deal. It was like done like a business deal. It wasn't like how Obama would do things, where they would have, how about we have a bunch of NGOs come into your country and do this, that, and the other thing that has nothing to do with this. How about that? How about you not die in an accident or your country get overthrown, and we have a bunch of our people, and a la Turkey, and so that's him fucking up Turkey. That was it. That's why Obama can't show his face almost anywhere. The whole game got flipped on him. That was beautiful. That's beautiful how bad he got played in that. So but there was an example. That would take years for most people on the left to do the research and to do the footwork to find out what those references were to. What Obama and Turkey, and oh yeah, you would have to go back to all these emails that got leaked from DNC and and blah blah blah, and you would have to know about like what America was up to with the Kurds and what we've been promising them. You would have to keep up with. You'd have to go backwards and look at, oh, where were the Kurds on their ancient land that always springs oil? Oh, look at that. They're over here, and there just happens to be oil fields there, and it's magic. It's a part of their unique form of Naqshbandi Sufi Islam. That they, wherever they go, oil just bursts out from the ground underneath them, and then Americans have to build airstrips there. So. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's very ancient, secret alchemy. You have to know all the magic letters, So, see, citing the Quran in a way that is both a bit blasphemous, a bit mocking, but you see, most people on the left wouldn't know what the magical letters in the Quran are. You wouldn't know why that's so important to things like the Naqshbandi Sufis. To know all these things, you have to have a quality of being very curious and wanting to read stuff that sometimes gets you nowhere. I have lots of books that there's no reason for me to own them anymore. They describe things events and points of view on things that they didn't pan out. The person totally missed it. They missed the whole game, or they were playing a different game. Other things that it's only for certain very specific understandings of details of history. That, like, say, I have a book that gets into the New York, with the East Coast Freemasonic culture around the time of the construction of Niagara Falls. It's a fascinating book. It's huge. It's absolutely gigantic. And if you're really into that period of history and that part of the culture and charitable organizations and such like, and how their system of degrees evolved during that time, that then you'd be very interested. But without, so not every book is like something you have to crack open. But what, say, Ludwig von Mises. Ludwig von Mises ends up, like, by the end of the story, he ends up being one of the most fascinating economists and philosophers of the last century. And it's because he was sort of the secret of anybody who got a hold of his writings. The Nazis confiscated his writings. Eventually the Soviets confiscated, or they got his writings. He ended up in America to escape the Nazis. And he ends up being kind of this sort of, in a back office, I think, economics professor or researcher or something like that, and recreates his great work. It's always set off to the side. Oh, no, you don't want to read that. You don't want to read that guy's writings. No. He's, and this is why the right totally crushes the left over and over again for almost 10 years straight on YouTube in debates. Because we could cite somebody like Ludwig von Mises and really, like, that your arguments end up getting absolutely folded in on themselves because there's certain fundamental problems with, well, no, but humans don't act like that. And okay, cite a time when humans did that. And then because on the left, you've become terrible students of history. I mean, abysmally so. That you sometimes even argue that you don't need to know history. I've even seen that happen on your side. That you don't need to know all that. Oh, all that's just ways of derailing the fundamental da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, No, you're materialists. You're the socialists, you're the leftists, you're the materialists. You got to argue from the material world, so you got to argue history. And once the Mises end of libertarians, they just jujitsu'd you. They just omoplotted you. They armbarred you. Then they did some catch can on you just to impress the crowd, and then suplexed you out of existence. Except that, and so you guys have to only argue amongst yourselves now, poorly citing what people say on the right with bad editing, with out of, like bad faith editing, because you won't read the books that we're citing. You won't read the articles we're citing, because then they would be difficult to refute. You would have to do work, and which the stereotype, the heuristic, comes through. That's why you're on the left. Because you don't like to work hard. So, and reading is work. Doing that reading is work. It is something that I've realized I naturally like reading books. It's easy for me. It is a bit easy for me. There's a lot of people it's not easy for. I mean, and that has to be respected. I mean, I really want to point out, I have met people that they say they wish they could just sit there and walk for an hour and read chapter after chapter after chapter of a book, and just be captivated by it. But they just don't. They have such a hard time doing that, and or they just don't have the time because of the way that their life is structured. That they don't. Whatever. And I just have to point out that is completely fair. So that there's people that simply their range of knowledge then becomes very limited because they don't have the time to do a lot of research outside that range of knowledge, because sometimes you would have to have the sources evaluated in a way. No, this is a good source. Oh, over here, no, that's not that really great of a source. Like, how right of center zero hedge. That's like, one of the most hub sites that you could go to for news, and an aggregator that everybody knows about. Revolver, another one, but there we go. Revolver would be below zero hedge in its general. It's not veracity. Oh, I'm forgetting that word. Somebody actually told. But there's a lot of open opinion on when you go to Revolver, where zero hedge, they will cite somebody who's from the left, even. Finding what this person said is interesting, as having an interesting point of view. And they'll have like the whole blog post with no fear. I mean, nobody on the right is afraid of the brilliance of the left outshining us. There we go. Because that's not how it works. That's just not the way we think. There's another one. Once you are no longer left wing, you don't really understand what makes the right tick. You just don't. You guys say things all the time. We just don't know what you're talking about. Like, we don't know why you think our minds are occupied with a wide variety of ideas. So you're like, that you're just sitting there listening, seeing what you guys post, your videos, where hearing somebody actually bought your book and is doing a critique of it, and that we're sitting there, we're just like, why would they even think that what? And to us, it sounds really like genuinely like insanity. But I had to walk through being surrounded, and I was like, okay, no, what is that about the left not getting what makes the right tick whatsoever in any way, shape, or form, where the right can actually emulate the left linguistically, in theme, it's easy to do. It's actually easy to do. It's light work. And we do it to make fun of them all the time. And so how does this work this way? Why is the left so bad at mocking the right in a way that comes across as brilliant, genuine, like, it's always at best kind of mom humor. Yeah. So what's the deal, and so I was like, yeah, they don't understand the source texts, that because it's rational. The right wing's whole movement fundamentally, in every case, traditionalists, the Republican Party. So this mostly has to do with that states have powers, individuals have responsibilities. There's all these various things about the way our system is constructed that it's like, no. There's standards. You must go by them. A lot of the foreign policy went completely nuts because of the introduction of George H.W. Bush into the party and his people, and that they took it over for your parents and maybe your grandparents' entire lives. And so these guys were always sticking a gun up some country's ass for one reason or another. And especially people that it turns out the CIA had supported beforehand. So George H.W. Bush, him and his dad and his friends' organization, the CIA, helped put all these people in power, and then George H.W. Bush is there to take them out as vice president, and eventually the job is completed with his son, George W. Bush, taking people out that his grandfather fundamentally had put into power. And so it's very much, if you were to think of it like gang members or an elaborate mafia kind of thing, it's a little easier to think of. You think of totalitarian governments of World War II as gang members. It's actually a lot easier to kind of wrap the mind around. You could parallel. You can make it like a parallel. There we go. But it takes that again. That takes knowing about all the various players around the leadership in World War II. To some degree, this takes understanding the people who made the New Deal. That takes reading very specific works. To know about the history of anti-Semitism that seems to go hand in hand with Karl Marx's philosophy wherever it's applied. That you have to know, it's because this kind of thinking of Marxism and this kind of materialism, it met a fundamentally incomplete era of knowledge about anthropology and history. There was no internet. Books were coming out all the time on new discoveries in history. And so applying then a wide variety of these kind of, this is the person who did something bad to these people, so everybody should share and you should pay up a little. This just met lots of historic stories of that. Yeah, it just met a lot of people's historic stories and myths in a way that we saw the disasters of. Even to this day, you are going to say this is a really good one. Most people on the left hear this they see it on the internet, but they don't know the reference, and then they don't know a whole bunch of other issues after this. The whole reference to Khazars and the Khazarian mafia, or Khazars, and it's the joke Khazar milkers, for the tendency of Ashkenazi Jewish women to have large breasts and such like, and it's this takes really not knowing what in that region that story's history somewhat is, because the Khazars are claimed by the Ukrainians as well. The Ukrainians claim that they were the Khazars, but instead they chose Orthodox Christianity. So this is this mythos that is actually descended to us from Islam, and from the Nazi allies in the Islamic world who hated Jews by credo. And but you would have to know about that history within the Islamic world of that kind of thing. And a lot of people, they'll be like, oh no, this leader and that leader and this leader, they were all really cool to Jews. And it's like, but the long history is of that they're a lower, they're dhimmi, that's the term that's used. And so then you take the jizya from the dhimmi, and so that's so they're not of the same rank as the rest of the members of the ummah and in their states. Period. That's how it's by credo that's the way, that's what they think. And so the left won't look into that aspect. You have to know about that. That takes reading. That takes research to understand. No, this was said by Muhammad himself. No, this is a standard, strong hadith that the entire ummah operates under. It's just all. And if you don't know what hadith is, then bam, another thing you don't know about. The left and source citation is always offering somebody the golden bough, and that they'll never even open a page of it. And it just is so sad, because there's so much stuff like that's been written that's considered right of center. But when you actually really look into the subject, Lords of the Left-Hand Path, this is a guy who has been somehow pushed into the category of the right. But he's one of the greatest writers on occult, quote unquote, traditions in like the last 50 years. He's done this tremendous amount of research on it. His book, The Lords of the Left-Hand Path, is just a general coverage of this. I think he still operates some kind of occultist organization. He has like literally one of those people that is from a quote-unquote tradition of occultism, they call it. So, and I mean, and he's fully aware of fully and completely aware of what he's talking about, and puts it in easy to understand, definitive terms. There's no words wasted. Well, because so much of sort of organized, in any way understood occultism tended to be sort of quote-unquote European descent, a lot about people like him, these white guys teaching about the real occultism and pre-Christian spirituality and religions of Europe. Nobody wanted to hear that. They want to hear a bunch of bogus Mother Gaia, they want to hear bullshit, and from a woman. And so, want to hear something that makes them feel a lot better about themselves, and confirms, it confirms feminism or something, or Marx, and it really something that confirms the worldview that the Marxists have taken as pre-Christian and prehistoric, pre-civilized humans, like how they behave. They have to believe in Marx's model. So what they just do is they pervert things like history of that specific field, and they just pull people in who that's what they think. They are fundamentally Marxists in one way or another, or agree with that model of worldview, and or they're feminists or one of the various offshoots of Marxism, and so they end up being like these people who they'll do anything to shape history so it fits that mold, rather than accepting, from what we observed, what we thought about this field of knowledge, we weren't, now we know a lot, we suddenly learned a lot. It's kind of thrown everybody off, and some people find that refreshing. I have found liberals do not. Unless it confirms the way they already saw the world, they don't like knowing something new. All people can be like this. What I've noticed within, especially about the last 2 decades, is that's much more prevalent now with liberals. Um, and one of the reasons why is because if sort of the sunny, happy, fantasy liberal world has complete, like, some kind of great scientific backing to it, well, excellent. That's, for the conservatives, this is excellent. All of a sudden, all we have to do is just mine the unobtainium. That's all we got to do. All we got to do is get, start figuring out how to, run things, run our dream machines now. But if what the discovery is that it kind of crushes that fantasy world and is ultra real and shows us that we're much smaller and much less powerful than we could have ever imagined, and makes us sort of feel like we're creations in a world that's kind of terrible. I know. And that the only thing that's going to work is ardor, and that good things come to those who wait. See, if it's that, well, then you're going to have to depend upon wisdom for to really kind of get yourself through. Things have always been hard. There's a pattern of thinking that people who've gone through hard times have, and they luckily wrote it down, like, say, in a book of Proverbs, or the Analects of Confucius, or the Tao Te Ching, or the Hua He Ching, and that there's you have all these things you can look back on and be like, how do we get through what now we understand why it's so difficult, and that hasn't improved anything. And then at some point somebody comes along and goes, luckily, because we now understand why this is so difficult, we've come up with something that provides some type of solution for that, some technology where ideas are actually philosophy, and ideas are actually a way, they're a technology technically, so that you can better take information and categorize it for people, and have information analyzed and categorized and collated for you. So the left not being able to cite Ayn Rand, and a pithy thing that Ayn Rand said, that it's like to know, like, no, this, I cite this, and I shoot it down, then, what, they will have nothing to say. The left doesn't do that anymore. This doesn't happen anymore. That's from a long time ago. Like, a long time ago. I was there to see this die. Now there's a handful of people, and now it's celebrities. Now what it is it's, you have Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he says things that are not just not scientific, they're absolutely moronic sometimes. They're not logical. You're just shocked that somebody would call themselves a scientist and say the things he says. And because he's not. He's obviously just not. He's obviously just some black celebrity who owns a lab coat as a part of his with it they come as a bunch of box full of props. There's an afro, comes with an afro and a lab coat. Dr. Black Man. Yeah, and he'll agree with anything that polite white women who vote Democratic think is science. He knows his place. He knows where his funding's coming from. So there we go. So I just wanted to make this clear. Really. This is why they call it the red pill. You guys don't know, and that's why you fear it. You realized once you start going down that road, knowledge changes you. It's knowledge changes you. It's not something that is some kind of make-believe emotional stuff. It's not feelings. No. The knowledge about subjects is what changes you. And that's because of your fear of that. Because your own ideas are not based really on good, solid epistemology and good, solid, factual, accurate knowledge. You know what you fear. You know. You know you can't beat us. You know you have to play games and be tricky, and that you can't take on any of our pith subjects and win. You have to play games. You have to pull tricks. And and that's why Rumble is going to be a big deal, and YouTube is going to slowly die off. You guys are going to kill Twitch in the long run. Everything you leftist touch, you actually kill. Every business, and so it's kind of fun, that part of it too. Don't worry, everybody. I mean, really, like, a lot of people know this. Don't worry. So, yeah, good luck.